Welcome into another Inside Carolina Noon Dish. I am Tommy Ashley. That is Don Callahan. We are sponsored by Johnny T-Shirt and JohnnyT-Shirt.com. And also, if you're watching these and you're not a member of Inside Carolina's premium crowd, go to InsideCarolina.com, sign up. It's really cheap right now. It is worth every penny when it comes down to it because you get Don Callahan scoops, Don Callahan's hard work on football recruiting, and it remains busy. And then, of course, everything else. Jason Staples' film breakdowns, all the exclusive content, and I hadn't even mentioned the basketball side of it, where you get all that basketball recruiting stuff from Sherelle and the gang. Don, it's been a week. We're doing these once a week. I feel like I see you more than I see, most people in my life. And
That's such a bad thing.
Every time I plug in here, you look exactly the same. I mean, why am I getting old and you are not?
My I thought you were gonna say because my outfits are all the same. My
Well,
daughter would always
I don't see a gritty shirt or nothing.
no, my daughter would say I'm like a cartoon character because I just wear the same outfit every day. I wanted to give a special shout out to what you were just mentioning about Jason Staples, his breakdowns. They're always been good. I've always enjoyed them, but I think right now, because we were just talking about the roster and just understanding this roster and the new players, and they're still new to. I mean, they're still new to me. Maybe people are better at picking up these names and a grasp of who these players are. But Jason does a really good job of explaining certain things, and I've enjoyed kind of watching his stuff to get a better grip on things. But so chat MVP was here. Who was it? Paul H. So Paul H. This podcast is dedicated to you. I don't know. Has he ever been chat MVP?
I don't think so because I don't recognize the name. But look, it has been so hectic and kicking out content and trying to cover the teams and talking so baseball and basketball and football. I mean, it's a lot going on. This is my third podcast of the last 18 hours, and it's the third different sport. And we're not even close to finish. We got a lot going on. Before I forget, shout out to the folks that are in the chat. And if you're in the chat right now, if you're listening to this later, get down to the Bowls lot on Saturday ahead of the Richmond game. Don Callahan's been saying he's going to make an appearance, but I've got some cool guests. I got Jason Staples coming down for the full show.
Wow. Speaking of the
devil. I've got another former player coming down there. We've got our team of interns that'll be there, and yours truly, and then maybe Don.
When are you going to be out there on Saturday?
The show is from 12:30 to 2:30.
Yeah, I won't make the show, but how early are you going to be out there?
I'll be out there probably 11 at the latest, probably earlier than that at the usual spot.
All right. I might I'll try again.
You said Richmond at the season started, and yeah.
Well, I did try to make the last one, but with all the uncertainty and the craziness of that Monday opener, I basically changed course like literally while I was parking.
That was nuts, wasn't it? Wasn't it crazy?
It just was. There was so much. Well, it's not just that. It was just there was just so much unknown. It would have been selfishly, it would have been nice for me to have a game like Richmond first, and I'm sure it would have been nice for North Carolina too. But to have Richmond first to get a feel for, because everybody explains how things are going to be done, and it's just different when you actually see it in practice. And so with that uncertainty, I worry a lot. So I was worried about, making sure things went smoothly. And I have learned through my experience that the best thing you could do sometimes is just show up early. And so that's what I was going to do. So maybe this Saturday, I'll just see how my Saturday morning goes, because my departure time depends on a lot of variables, including a baby. So
you got a lot going on.
Yeah.
I will say that I like to get out there early, sort of get the lay of the land, see people. Sean Crowley, you're talking about sandwiches. What am I missing? I know there's going to be some sandwiches out there. Hopefully some fresh barbecue sandwiches from one of our esteemed folks, but I'll shout him out on the live show. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Get there early. I don't worry about a lot. I worry about stuff that's like irrelevant. but the big stuff I don't worry about, and I for sure don't plan. But we'll be out there early in the Bowls lot. Show from 12:30 to 2:30. Hopefully, we'll have everybody on board and have a fun time with it. Joey won't be out there, and Joey's the planner. So fully expect it to be chaotic. Yeah.
Okay.
It'll be chaotic on Saturday with me running the ship and everybody else joining it up. But anyway, the reason we are here, well, no, we got to do a top five. And the sandwich comment in the chat threw me off, but we're going to go top 5 fries. Yes. French fries.
I love fries.
Okay, so
and
top 5.
My wife and I always get in debates, best fries. So this is important.
Okay, so are we doing fast food fries? Or are we just doing fries at any restaurant? Or
I think we could do any fries. I'm trying to think if there's some sort of loophole, because usually somebody always finds some sort of weird loophole. I think if you wanted to have fries right now, where would you go? It could be a restaurant. Could be, I would imagine most of them are going to be fast food, right? Okay. You would think, but if there's a particular restaurant that just has some badass fries, let it roll. I love to know where it's at.
McDonald's fries are so overrated, man.
No way. They're not my number one, but you get some hot, fresh, salted McDonald's fries. And the beauty of McDonald's, and we've had this talk before, you can go anywhere and McDonald's is always the same. There are certain franchise chain restaurants that where you go really determines the quality and the quality of the food, the quality of the service too. But McDonald's, McDonald's fries are going to be McDonald's fries no matter where in North Carolina you pick them up.
I agree. You know what? I was disappointed with McDonald's the other day, and we need to talk recruiting here, but this is relevant. I got there at 10:35.
Okay.
And I don't usually do
It's a breakfast thing, isn't it?
I was trying to get breakfast, but breakfast was over at 10:30. So I said, fine, then I'll just get this crispy chicken sandwich anyway. And it'll be breakfast and I'll get a coffee. And it was just, well, the chicken itself was the same chicken they put on the biscuit.
Yeah.
And it had been sitting there all morning. So I didn't get lunch. I got old breakfast on a hamburger bun.
Yeah.
And so I was very disappointed. So I'm at it with McDonald's right now. So y'all keep it up. Y'all keep up talking about McDonald's in the chat. I'm gonna start banning people left and right. Don, let's talk. We're talking with Don Callahan on the Noon Dish here on September the 10th. Carolina, Richmond on Saturday at 3:30. Don's got his work cut out for him covering that. But Don, the big news, I entitled this show Flipmas. Well, no, I didn't. I said Flip Season. It could have been Flipmas.
Mm-hmm.
JB Shabazz, a local product, flips to North Carolina from Tennessee. Just sort of highlight what happened. Well, give us a history of his recruitment for folks that aren't on the premium boards and don't read your stuff from start to finish, which is another reason folks need to get on there. But give the history to his commitment and to his flip and why it's important for Carolina.
Let's get the importance out of the way, because that's pretty straightforward. Coming out of the summer, and this is something, if you've been reading Inside Carolina, the staff felt like the one need for its class was a true offensive tackle. Now, there's 6 other offensive linemen committed, and one of them, Nick from Mura, he could potentially, and he probably is projected as an offensive tackle, but he plays in a system where it's very run heavy, so you don't get to see the pass pro and all that sort of stuff. So he's not like a guarantee slam dunk left or offensive tackle. So this was definitely a need of North Carolina's. They were looking at some, they had their eyes on a, I don't know how much, like probably like a half dozen or so targets to kind of see how their senior seasons began. But obviously went back to a guy that's been on their board for a very long time in JB Shabazz. Shabazz is a guy that the prior staff identified very early on during his sophomore season. He's a kid mostly is focused on basketball kind of growing up. I mean, when you see him in person, it makes sense. He's a guy who's always been very, very tall, 6'6", 6'7". And Tommy, from watching basketball, 6'6", 6'7" is not really a novelty in basketball, but it's a huge asset on the football field. And so naturally, just playing that in high school, he started to show some promise. Definitely has the physical tools. So the Pryor staff offers him, drew him to campus a bunch, to the point where following his, he was offered during his sophomore season. Following that season, he visited a couple times in the spring also. And I was talking to him, and he said, you know what? I mean, North Carolina has to be my leader. They're just so far ahead of everybody else. And that kind of stuck for a very long time, all the way into the season, his junior season, which was last football season. And then during that time also, he transferred to East Forsyth High School, which is where Bryce Baker was the quarterback. So he's now becomes closer friends with Bryce Baker, which obviously just helped North Carolina stock within his mind. But his stock actually went really high playing his junior season at East Forsyth, mostly because East Forsyth throws the ball a lot more than your average high school. And so it kind of showed his pass pro, which is a huge asset of his because he's super athletic. He's long, with that basketball background, big kid. But as his stock rose, schools like Tennessee, Ohio State, South Carolina, a bunch of other schools came in and started to go at him hard. And then North Carolina fired Mac Brown, which immediately really dropped North Carolina out of this race for the most part. The new staff comes in, makes him a priority, but really kind of struggled to get him on campus. He finally did for the UNC Duke basketball game that junior day, and afterwards said, hey, I'm adding North Carolina to my official visit schedule, because he already had an official visit schedule kind of planned out. Added North Carolina to the official visit schedule. June comes around. He cancels North Carolina, and I believe he replaced it with Penn State. Also took an official visit to NC State. Believe Ohio State, Tennessee, and South Carolina, I think, were the other ones that he took official visits to. And then as we know, in July, he committed to Tennessee. Then we come back to what I was mentioning earlier. North Carolina has this need. What's interesting is so he appears at the home opener against TCU, and spoke to him very briefly. He kind of downplayed his presence as being there in support of Bryce Baker, just kind of doing some digging afterwards. North Carolina, obviously, it makes a whole lot of sense for North Carolina to target him, to try to get him to flip. And what I was told, I think it was like a day, maybe even that morning, that he actually announced that UNC felt like it was probably going to need an official visit to complete the flip. And they were targeting that Clemson weekend, which is October 4th, for the official visit. And just how, with the day and age that we're in with NIL and agents, things changed pretty quickly to where he's announcing that he's committed to North Carolina, has flipped his commitment to the Tar Heels.
Couple questions. 66280 listed on the recruiting board page. Is that legit?
Yeah, I mean, are you, as far could it be off an inch? Could it be off?
Well,
weight?
I mean, it's fine. I'm usually, when I look at high school kids, like the height, whatever, they always fudge on that, but it's the weight. You see a lot of these guys will put in, oh, I'm 280, and then you get out there and it's 280, but they're circled with a lot of baby fat and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the general rule is you knock off an inch or two. If you get a reported weight from a kid, you usually knock off an inch or two and then knock off 10 pounds, which is kind of funny how that is. Now, I wish, I'm probably going to tell you under what my current weight is, but
what's your current weight, Don? If you were on a recruiting board here, what would it say?
Well, I weigh myself every morning, so I'm 215 this morning. Okay. I guess if I was a reverse recruit, I would tell you 205.
And how tall are you?
About 6 foot.
Okay.
Yeah.
6 foot, 215. Are you a good size middle linebacker or a short middle linebacker?
Well, the middle is definitely where it's at, but it is what it is.
I'm 6'3" and a half, 200. So I'm Cam Chancellor safety.
I got to get my workout to mimic Tommy's over there. get rolling.
It's called stress and walking.
Mine's called snacking. I love sweets too much, as
well, that's
people who
why.
listen to this regularly know.
Yeah, that's my problem lately is eating too much junk food. Let me ask you another question. We're talking about JB Shabazz from East Forsyth, flipped from Tennessee to North Carolina recently. Thus the title of the show, Flip Season. But Don, looking at his rankings, this is one thing that you cannot get me to wrap my head around. So I'm gonna let you try. I don't know how update they are, but you've got he's a 93 on Rivals, he's a 88 on 247, he's a 78 on ESPN for a composite of 89.76, which is a 4-star. Why the disparity in those? We've talked a lot about evaluating people in person and why you're one of the gold standards, but why the disparity here?
I mean, is this a general question or with him in particular?
You can do it with him in particular, but it's a general question as well because we see it across the board with a lot of different players.
I mean, I think this is the way it should be, to be honest. I mean, if you and I think a lot of fans look at this and think that there's a consensus opinion on everyone. But when you actually talk to coaches, even coaches on the same staff, there are going to be differing opinions on kids. I mean, I've had multiple coaches tell me through the years, I really like this kid, but my O-line coach doesn't, so we can't offer him. You know, I've heard that hundreds and hundreds of times. It's just, so I think it's good that we have differing opinions. Which one is right? I mean, it depends on, usually they give a little bit of an update on draft night to say who's right. But I think with him in particular, there is a little bit of, he has the tools. He has showed some promise with what you've seen from him, the past pro level. But with offensive linemen in general, how did they adjust to playing against guys who are the same size as them? I mean, most games, Shabazz is going up against a guy who's probably 100 pounds lighter than he is. Now East Forsyth will play some good teams, and there'll be better players that he'll play against. But if you were going to pick a random Friday night to go see JB Shabazz, he's probably playing against, not a great player. And so my point of that, and this is not just JB, and this is not taking a shot at East Forsyth's competition or anything like that. This is just as general. We could say this about just about any player, unless you're playing in, Atlanta, or even in Atlanta. I mean, they're still you play against really good teams, but there are some really bad teams on your schedule too, that you're just beating 75-0. My point of this is that for a coach, and this is where the art comes into evaluation, you got to see what you see on film. You got to take it and say, okay, how does this kid adjust when every day he's going up against, players of the same size? And if you look at, I am definitely a believer in the rankings. I mean, if anybody wants to talk badly about the rankings, I feel like that argument has been solved a long time ago. It's a waste of breath now. The rankings are the best vehicle we have to determine or instrument that we have to determine just what type of player this is, what type of prospect this is. But if you go and look at those research projects on just kind of looking back at different rankings, the one position that the rankings do the worst at is an offensive lineman. So, and that is just the fact that a lot of these guys get by beating up on smaller guys. And once they get to college, everybody is their size. How do they adjust? Also, we're dealing with a very small talent pool. There are very few kids in high school walking around who are 6'6", 280, 300 pounds. And so anytime somebody meets those requirements, immediately they're going to get some looks. And so, so the hit rate is going to be a lot smaller. Whereas you take another position like wide receiver or running back, where the size requirements aren't so rigid. I mean, you can't take a tackle that's 6'2". You just can't. But a running back, you could take a 5'10" running back. You could take a 5'9" running back. You could take a 5'10" wide receiver easily. but you would love them to be 6'2", 6'3", but there is some flexibility in there when you're dealing with other positions that you just can't take when it comes to linemen, which contributes to why it's a hard position to evaluate.
And you see guys wash out and never produce, or the flip to that is guys that you didn't expect turn in to be monsters on the offensive line. It's an interesting discussion talking about level of competition and all as well, because I asked Bill Belichick that on Wednesday, or excuse me.
And he danced around it. I heard your question. I thought it was
No,
a great question.
I don't think he really danced around it. I thought he talked for over a minute, which I went back and looked at the transcript, so I got the longest answer of the day. But yeah, you have to take into account everything. But he was talking about fundamentals. If you can't do the fundamentals against whoever, it's not going to show up against the big boys. And but anyway, it's an interesting thought, and it's a lot of when people see, and I don't want to shout out a kid in particular, but Zach Rice. People talked about Zach Rice and why he wasn't playing.
I don't want to. I'm going to.
Yeah, I mean, because he, unfortunately,
it's a great example.
He is sort of the poster child for what we're talking about. Really to no fault of him. It's not his fault. It's the adults in the room that, to me at least, placed all the accolades and everything without really knowing, I guess. But anyway, JB Shabazz. How many is that in this 26 class? Is that
37, I think.
Goodness gracious, what a change. We talked about 70 new players on this 2025 UNC football roster. It's going to be about the same next year, I would expect, or at least close to it. So,
and we're doing the same thing, but expecting a different outcome. Isn't that the definition of insanity?
Well, I mean, you have to do it more than twice. When it's once, it's a dot. When it's twice, it's a line. When it's three times, it's a trend. So we're not there yet.
Okay, fair enough.
But the thing is, it's like that for everybody. There's and except for the probably 10, 12, 15 schools.
I still think there's a lot of schools are still building through high school, which I think is the way to go. So the 37 is kind of in line with that. But the problem with some of this is, well, I'm not going to get into it. I don't want to get mad.
No, we were going to get Don Callahan rant again. I mean, the thing is, you need stability to be able to have solid high school recruiting classes, though, right?
Yes.
I mean, I don't think you can have coaching staff turmoil and have player and not have player turmoil.
Correct.
I think, and especially this day and age when people can leave and go wherever they want. And we've also talked about before, it's usually year 2 that you get a massive exodus and influx because people see what it's really about and all, and who knows how it'll work out for North Carolina. Anyway, what else on the recruiting trail? We're talking with Don Callahan. Let me do this. Let me do Johnny T-shirt right fast. Johnny T-shirt, JohnnyT-shirt.com. They're on Franklin Street to help you in person, get whatever you need. They've got some cool, I'm personally, I like Navy on Carolina's uniforms. They have the Navy throwbacks in there to buy. They also have every other piece of swag you could want for Carolina or Chapel Hill or the School of Journalism, anything you need there. And the biggest thing for me is that they're very cool people and they're very nice customer service. And they do that online or in person. So go see them. And if you're a premium subscriber at InsideCarolina.com, join premium, you get 10% off your order at Johnny T-shirt. Don, anything big on the recruiting trail? We talked about Richmond's probably not one of the biggest recruiting weekends, but there still is opportunities there. What's it looking like or shaping up to be for you covering this stuff on Saturday at 3:30?
Well, the list is still early. The list isn't great. A lot of the in-state guys, the good thing and bad thing about getting a lot of the top in-state guys on campus for that opener is that might be the only time you get them on campus. We talked about this a week ago, I believe, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, just how you're probably only getting a lot of these kids on campus once, maybe twice. So they're not going to come to the Richmond game if they came to the to the TCU game. And I'm seeing this and kind of reaching out to recruits and talking to them, seeing where they're going. So the list isn't great so far. We still have a couple of days where names could be added and that sort of thing, but it's not an attractive opponent. I mean, we did our rankings of the most, we did a top 5, and I don't think Richmond was in anyone's top 5, right?
Yeah, I believe even Stanford was ahead of Richmond for sure, because Stanford at least is an ACC school. So, which is just hilarious to say. But yeah, Richmond was probably last of the 6 home games for sure.
Yeah, so this is probably going to be the worst turnout. It's probably going to be dominated by just a couple of in-state commits. I say that knowing that there's 5, I think, in-state commits. And then one of them just texted me before we hopped on. David Green said he wasn't going to be able to make it. So there's one down. But yeah, so yeah, it's not going to be a great weekend as far as recruit information and all of that. But we're still pumping out a lot of content from the opener, really, from visitors from that, and catching up with recruits, getting their thoughts. Posted something on Rashad Street's interesting story on how he ended up visiting North Carolina for the opener. He did not intend on visiting, and then that prior weekend received a phone call from Bill Belichick and changed his mind. So that was kind of interesting. And I mean, just stuff like that, just still getting feedback from that visit and thoughts from recruits on how North Carolina is going and that sort of thing. But I mean, it will start to pick up a lot more once, the Clemson game will be a big game for North Carolina, probably its second biggest game from a recruiting standpoint. I mentioned this, I guess, a week or so ago. I expect it to be a game heavily attended by out-of-state guys, because the opener was it was very difficult for an out-of-state recruit to get to North Carolina and then to get home and not have to miss, school or practice or whatever. But, Clemson obviously is going to fall on a Saturday, which makes it a lot easier to accomplish those things.
Let me ask you the question that a lot of people ask is, how much does playing style affect recruits? And we've seen North Carolina's offense, even though I will say, we talked about Jason's film breakdowns, a lot of consternation and darts have been tossed at the coaching staff. But as Jason's pointed out, there's a lot to be had that hadn't been had because of player execution. But either way, the finished product has not looked great on the field at times. How much of that, when do you start hearing about that from recruits, if that's the thing?
I think it's more a focus on their position, and just kind of put this in perspective. I think it's further down the importance ladder for the average recruit than a lot of other things like comfort level, location, relationships on staff, that sort of thing. Playing time, all that sort of stuff. I think, if you're a tight end, you're going to have a different opinion than if you're a running back. I think, if you look at North Carolina's offense, you got to feel like if you're a freshman, or if you're a high school running back, you got to feel like this is a great offense for me, because look, Damon June, when is someone going to correct Buck, who keeps on calling him Demon?
You do not correct Buck Sanders. And Buck, if you're listening, that's Don Callahan saying you need to get it right, not me. Buck will be in the parking lot on Saturday. Don, why don't you come on out and correct him face to face? But yeah, I thought it was hilarious.
Damon June got plenty of reps against Charlotte and had some really good runs. So you got to feel like, okay, if I do well in practice, I come in as a true freshman and I'm a running back, I'm going to get an opportunity there. I know one of the questions in the Belichick press conference a couple of times was talking about just his usage as running backs. And he keeps on mentioning how if he had Jim Brown or Barry Sanders or whatever, that's who he would ride the entire time. But as a couple of the reporters mentioned, at New England, he was famous for just constantly rolling out, a rotation. It wasn't even a running back by committee. It was just, changing it almost every week, which if you are a fantasy football player, you didn't like that so much because you never knew when to use or when to play a Patriots running back, because you might play a guy and get a goose egg because he never got any snaps, even though he received 20 carries the week before. But yeah, so for a running back, great offense. I think there's still a lot of things we're still trying to figure out, and I think they're trying to figure it out. As far as usage and all of that. So it's a little hard, but yeah, I think it's a factor. I've definitely had. I was, to use an example. Now again, this doesn't happen all the time, but I was talking to somebody about Carson Snead and said, hey, I kind of viewed his brother being at UNC Dayton as a really big force. And they said, yeah, it was a big plus for North Carolina, but really what they didn't like so much was how Tennessee has used its tight ends in the past. And that was always kind of harmful. And that they've been told from North Carolina that, hey, we're going to use our tight ends a lot. They're going to be a big part of our offense. And, look at what Coach Belichick has done with tight ends with the Patriots. I don't think we need to go into detail about that. I think we should all know by now. So that was a major selling point, a lot more of an important selling point than you would think. But hey, if you remember Bryson Nesbitt, I can remember talking to some sources at North Carolina, and they said, hey, look, we love this kid. If he comes here, we will figure out a way to fit him into the offense. But if you remember, at that time, before Nesbitt came, UNC was not using the tight end hardly at all in the offense. And I can remember the person I spoke to said, yeah, I mean, if this kid actually looks at our offense, he's not coming here. But so for him, it obviously wasn't a big deal. I think for him, the location, the education matters so much more than, the tight end uses. And it ended up working out to where he, his skill set forced Phil Longo to change up his offense to include a tight end a lot more. So you can kind of see it both ways. It really, I know you hate the case by case, but really that's what it is. It depends on the position and it depends on the recruit, just how important, how closely are they paying attention to those things. And are there other factors that are just way more important to them, such as comfort, education, location, those sort of things.
Yeah, it's a great point. There's just so many different variables that go into it. It's not just about the money. It's not just about one particular thing in recruiting, especially. Talking with Don Callahan here on the Noon Dish about 33 minutes in. You mentioned fantasy football. Did I tell you how I lost fantasy football this past weekend? As an aside, I had Josh Allen, was down 19 plus points. Then Buffalo starts their comeback. I get to within, how many points it was, and he throws a pass, and the dude trips. He would have walked into end zone. He trips. I was 1 or 2/10 of a point behind at that moment. So I'm like, sweet, just run the ball one time, and I got this. They kneel it 3 times. And
that's the worst.
And it cost me 1/10 of a point or 2/10 of a point each kneel. I lose by less than a point.
A long time ago, and this was, I guess, kind of infamous. Brian Westbrook taking the kneel down right before, he broke through, was about to score a touchdown. This is a long time ago, obviously, and then decided to stop and kneel it down to kill the clock instead of scoring the touchdown. I lost a game on that.
Well, we're not going to lose the game on this because we're bringing in the heavy hitters here. When you don't have anything to do, you join the Noon Dish with Tommy, Ashley, and Don Callahan. Greg, what's happening?
I am honored to be here, guys. Anytime I can be in Don Callahan's presence.
Hey, I am still waiting for our wings.
It's coming. It's coming.
Wait a minute.
The ballet world has overtaken my life, but it'll be on the docket here soon.
Well, one day somebody will be very famous doing that ballet stuff. So we're all here
not
for
me.
it. Not. It did not come from Dad.
Certainly not.
But Greg, I wanted to get you in here on the noon dish because I think the new era is sort of relevant, and I wanted to ask you, Don, this too. But I'll start with Greg. Is how much has the Carolina? I don't even know the correct word. They're all in on football. How much? And Don, you can answer the recruiting side of it. But Greg, to what you've been covering, they want to win and win big, and they're pouring money into every aspect of it. What have you seen? Just looking at the amount of money they've put into all aspects of this, and how do you think it'll affect recruiting in the end?
Yeah, it's an interesting dynamic because if you look at Alabama, Georgia's probably not even a good example because Kirby Smart had to gear things up very quickly when he took over a decade ago. But Bama and Ohio State and Michigan, it's kind of been a slow build. And, they were atop the heap for a while, and then maybe they fell off. And they said, okay, well, now we've got to do this and this to get back up. And so it's kind of a staggered step, but that's why you see a lot of the teams atop the AP top 10. And that's one of the things I thought was very funny is all this talk about NIL and house settlement changing college sports, something we've never seen before. And then you look at the preseason AP top 10 and it's Notre Dame and Ohio State and Alabama and Georgia, all the exact same teams. And that's for a reason, because they have the infrastructure in place. Yes, these are big changes with NIL in the house settlement, but those programs are in place in terms of knowing how to funnel money in this direction or that direction to make sure everything's covered. UNC not necessarily is in that position because yes, they've been doing a better job in the last decade or so of really emphasizing football, but not like what we've seen the last 9 or 10 months. Not since Belichick came on board. When he was hired, or even before he was hired, the conversation was, okay, if we're going to hire Bill Belichick, it's just not $10 million for him. We've got to pay to elevate the coaching staff and the support staff. We've got to make sure we have all of our bases covered with recruiting. We've got to be able to generate more money with the boosters. So we got to change how we're doing things on that front. We got to bring in a chief revenue officer. We got to start thinking about how we want the next athletic director's resume to look. All these things have played a role, and it's all been very fast. I mean, when you're talking about all these changes taking place in less than a year, it's a challenge. And so I think what you're seeing is, yes, there's a lot more emphasis there. There's a lot more money there. But now you're like, okay, what exactly do we do with it? How do we disperse it appropriately? And I think the same thing applies to Belichick and Lombardi. Yeah, they understood how to do things at the NFL level. They're trying to figure it out at the college level. And so it's a process. It'll take time. And eventually it's going to really filter down into recruiting with better evaluation and scouting and those types of things. Don, you may have seen some of that already, but I'm sure that's going to really ratchet up in the next year or so.
Yeah,
Don?
I mean, I think there have definitely been a couple of situations where the whispers were that North Carolina, I'm trying to be careful with my wording, but North Carolina outbid for a particular kid. Outbid is probably not a good word, but maybe offered more than what some other schools were willing to pay them.
We can say outbid now, I think. I mean, it's official, right?
But yeah, I mean, to Greg's point, I think the one other thing too, now there are definitely kids who will go to the highest bidder, but I still think the vast majority of kids are still choosing schools for other reasons. A lot of that is most offers are in the same ballpark. So if you really want to steal a kid from a school that he's leaning towards, you really kind of have to go outside of that ballpark. And really, if you think about it even further, 3 stars are probably not worth just throwing the bank account out, So it's really mostly, and there are definitely exceptions, but it's mostly just that top 200, 300 recruits that are worthy of kind of getting into some sort of bidding war. But I mean, you look at, and I always bring it up to the posters, the rivals before we arrived actually did one. These anonymous surveys with recruits from, the Under Armour All-American game. They did one from I can't remember what's the most recent one. And recruits will say, "Yeah, I'm doing pretty well money-wise, but I did leave some money on the table. I chose a school that wasn't my highest amount of money." And because there is still other factors that are important. Now, you're not going to be in the game if you're not at least in that ballpark. That's for certain. But yeah, I mean, there still are other factors that are important, which is why if I were to give you the rankings from the high school recruiting rankings from the 2020, 2025 class, and give you one from the 2015 class or 2010 class, you won't be able to tell the difference if you kind of just look at them really quickly, because they're all the same teams. And as Greg was pointing out, the top 25, all the same teams, because there's a lot of other factors that are involved. And yes, I mean, now the money is above the table, whereas before, the money just didn't appear out of nowhere. The money has been somewhat present before it became legal to pay kids.
We're talking about the money. We were talking about McDonald's earlier.
You were.
The McDonald's bag circuit. Greg, to the point here, and Don, you can answer this as well. At what point does it balance out, or does it ever balance out? I think that was the point of rev share and all that kind of stuff. At least I thought was trying to balance things out.
Yeah, and I was going there, Tommy, and I think that's a good point. But Don, your point, Sonny Dykes before the Carolina game, I mean, he was joking around about, there's a lot of money being paid to players now. And it's kind of like it was a long time ago when there was money being paid to the players, just not quite as publicly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you have a head coach of a Big 12 school saying that and joking around about it, everybody kind of knows what was taking place. But you just play the game and keep your mouth shut and move on. Yeah, Tommy, the idea with revenue share was that there would be above board payments finally to student athletes, and it's set up to be 22%, I think, of the average Power 5 athletic department's financial revenue is what it was. So that's kind of where they come up with that number, and it's supposed to go up a little bit every year. But the idea was, here's an opportunity now. You don't have to do it, but you can share up to $20.5 million for this year, and that the number is going to go up, so that it would level the playing field. And I never thought that was going to be something that worked. I thought really what was going to work is being able to curtail the NIL deals that had gotten out of hand. Because let's be honest, a lot of them weren't NIL deals. They were just paying players.
They're still not.
Correct. Right.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, is that a lot of people were naive and thinking, well, once the House settlement comes through, everything's got to go through Deloitte and NIL Go. And that way, everything is going to be checked out. Sure. Yeah. Because what we found out is that, yes, with the business dealings, the actual contracts with businesses, a lot of those are getting cleared. A high percentage of those are getting cleared. But those are always legitimate items. It was the collectives and the booster groups who were just handing out money hand over fist where the issues were. And what have we seen with NIL Go? They've said, well, a lot of the collective deals aren't valid.
Yeah.
Well, no.
Yeah.
Right? And that's still kind of playing out. But
they had to go back and change the wording because they were, I guess, threatening to go back to court on it. Because you remember they came back and said, hey, a lot of these deals are not legit. They're not for business, quote unquote, business purposes by this definition and yada, yada. And said all these aren't going to go through, and they fought it real quickly, and they got scared, and they, basically kind of relented to allow some of these additional ones that clearly aren't for what we would call, they're not Dr. Pepper commercial sort of things,
Correct.
and they're and so they relented, so they're not doing what the intentions were.
Right. And as we've talked about before, if ESPN radio shows up at Tommy Ashley's front doorstep and say, Tommy, we think you're fantastic, we're going to offer you $2 million a year to come host a podcast for us. Who decides whether that's a legitimate value for
Tommy's wife?
services? Well, okay. Yes.
I decide
Yes.
that, and I'm saying
Outside
deuces.
of the Ashley home, whoever's paying it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
You
I
only
don't-
things are only worth what somebody will pay for them.
Absolutely. So how the NCAA thinks this is going to work, and yes, there's already been pushback. There's going to continue to be pushback. If a car dealership wants to pay a kid $500,000 and they think that's appropriate for what they can make because they've got the star, quarterback of their local team, that's their prerogative.
Yeah.
You can't make that decision for them. Now,
Correct.
Here's the other thing, and I think this is an interesting conversation. I went to the North Carolina Business Leadership Conference a couple months ago, and Bubba and John Curry from Wake Forest were there talking. And I thought Curry made a very good point. And he's of the opinion that there's been so much volatility with NIL and now with house settlement that everything is chaotic, but that because we now have some guardrails in place, and those guardrails have been coming before house settlement, right? There was 3 rules when NIL started. They've added rules each year. So they've been trying to kind of get some guardrails in place, and they're going to continue to do that. But his point is, like, if you look at free agency in Major League Baseball, well, that started in 1975. That started 50 years ago. And so when MLB looks at free agency now, it's just another business dealing. It's like what they do. It's nothing surprising. Everybody knows how to work around it and work through it and make it benefit whether it be their team or the player if you're an agent. We're like a year or 2 into this. Okay. So in 5 years, with rev share being in place, with NIL Go hopefully operating in some legitimate manner, players are going to know, okay, well, a backup left tackle at a Power 5 conference team is worth X. A starting left tackle is worth Y. And you're going to have that for every single position. And so you're going to have an idea of, all the athletic directors, all the football coaches, they pretty much know what each position's valued at. And it's going to get to the point where, Don, as you said, a lot of the prices for these kids are pretty similar now anyway.
Mm-hmm.
It's really going to be streamlined in a few years, is what Curry's saying. And because of that, there's not going to be this big money grab. Yeah, you're going to have an occasional kid comes in and they're going, oh, we're going to give you $4 million. But for the most part, the kid's going to have to decide, okay, do I want to take $50,000 more dollars from this school when I like this other school's athletic department setup better? I like campus better. It's close to mom and dad so they can actually drive and see me play. And so a lot of the things that really determine where kids went 10, 15 years ago will start becoming in vogue again. And the money's still going to be there, but it won't be the all-encompassing number one primary thing that it is right now. Maybe that's optimistic and naive, but I think there's some legitimacy there.
I agree with you on all that. I think that's still going on now, as I was mentioning before. I think, though, that if you're a 5-star quarterback, right, I think that what we were talking about, I guess we need a name for it, where each position has a certain amount of money, ballpark figure for them.
Player value. I mean,
the player value, yes. But, for a quarterback, if you're a 3-star guy, you're worth so much. If you're a 4-star guy, you're worth so much. 5-star, so much. I think that there are certain schools that will only have the funds to secure those 5-star guys. Now, they're the same schools that were getting those 5-star guys 5-10 years ago, but it's harder for North Carolina, who probably isn't in that stratosphere, or any other school. The playing field won't be level because it still be the same schools that will be competing for those 5-star guys, those blue chip guys, where a lot of the other schools will have to settle for the lower guys, where evaluation becomes important and yada yada. That's a whole different conversation. So I still think that there's going to the playing field will never be level with this stuff. I felt like all along, like, we don't have to deal with this with pro sports. Why? Because there's contracts and they're making a lot of money. There's no person who will go and offer whoever, Bryce Harper, $1 gazillion to go play for the Yankees because he's making a good bit amount of money with the Phillies and he is locked in on the contract. And because there's rules in place that, he can't just take his lawyers and go and sue MLB for. Whereas that's what we're dealing with here is that, I love the idea for the new portal window, but someone's going to challenge that because the NCAA doesn't have any right to restrict player movement like they are. And, I don't know the legality of a lot of these contracts and everything like that. They don't seem too ironclad. You had the kid who was at Wisconsin who just up and left, didn't even go into the portal, ending up at Miami. That doesn't seem like that's going to end well for Wisconsin. And so if that's the case there, then, it opens up the floodgates even more for these kids to just up and leave out of these quote unquote contracts. And you have all this other stuff with the eligibility that's being challenged. I just feel like the only way that we fix this is collective bargaining, and we're nowhere close to that yet, I don't think. And if you're hoping for any sort of level playing field, I don't think it's coming until we get to that point.
Yeah, in theory, some of the conversation with rev share is that, Alabama and Ohio State were able to stockpile talent. So they had third stringers who were 5 stars.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is, and we've seen it play out a little bit, especially on the basketball side of things, is if you're not the star at your position and you've got 2 or 3 other schools saying, look, we'll offer you a lot more money. Yeah, we're not Alabama, but we'll offer you a starter salary while you're getting a backup salary. Come play for us. And we've actually seen that play out.
Yeah.
And I think that is like one of the few positives
in
terms of leveling the playing field. I agree with you wholeheartedly that it's not going to be leveled regardless. But Bubba is a big proponent of collective bargaining. He thinks it's possible. I'm curious to see how that happens if you're not labeling players employees. That's been the push for the NCAA for 50 years, is that we do not want these student athletes to be employees. Why? Because there was a kid that got hurt back when Walter Byers was the executive director of the NCAA. There were concerns that the kid's parents was going to take the NCAA to court because he was playing basically on their behalf. And that's when they decided to craft the term student athlete so that they would not have any confusion with employment law. I mean, that was a lifetime ago. And we're still seeing that push to make sure, okay, well, these aren't employees. They're contract employees.
Yeah.
But they're not W-2 employees. So how you get to collective bargaining without that aspect is something to watch, because there is kind of a belief that collective bargaining can happen without having to go quite that far.
I do agree with Greg, what he's mentioning about, no longer does Alabama have their 4th string being a 5-star anymore, because we do see some parity. It's just, I don't think it's trickling down as much. But the way I think because I think I agree with Greg with all that. I think also they just don't want to deal with extra employees and have to deal with all that sort of mess and, insurance, which I'm sure is a huge thing. They don't want like full on insurance for these guys and all that sort of stuff that comes with being employees. I think you almost have to take the athletic department entity, separate it from the school, make it some sort of, I don't know what you would have to call it. You would still use the entity would still pay the school to use their name and all that sort of stuff, because I think you still need that identity. You still need North Carolina Tar Heels, but you almost have to separate it so that it's some sort of private entity that is a money making entity. Because that's the other problem that they're dealing with, is that they have to be nonprofit and not make a profit, basically. And that's kind of a problem when you kind of dig deeper into some of the stuff that the athletic departments are dealing with also. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole, I guess.
Greg, to what Don just talked about there, if you do that, then you just go straight minor league sports,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's not. It's kind of like when a video game comes out, they don't have the rights to the teams. It's just like, the Chapel Hill footprint, footprints or
Well, I
something
think
like
you
that.
pay the school. The school gets something there's some sort of arrangement where they're still the North Carolina Tar Heels. And maybe you do something where, students get in free. And then also the players at that entity, they get to attend classes or whatever, take them online, whatever, at UNC. You have that sort of arrangement, but that kind of helps with the legality. And then also they could be professional. They can collectively bargain, yada, yada, all that other stuff. And then it solves all these problems.
Yeah. So what Kentucky did, and they kind of led the charge on this, is that they've got a new for-profit LLC called Champions Blue. And it's basically they've converted their athletic department into that for-profit LLC to be able to better utilize this. And so I think there is some direction there. I also think we're probably not too far away from the Big Ten and the SEC finally showing their hand and us getting to a point where I don't know if, football separates and becomes its own little division separate from everything else. And maybe that allows the haves and the have-nots to get split apart. And then you can kind of get back to, almost like a FCS level for everybody that doesn't want to move to the big boy group. I don't know exactly how that's going to look. I think it's inevitable that we're heading in that direction. But there's just so many little pieces involved. You got private equity finally coming into play with some of these schools. I know a lot of those groups are kind of sniffing around the edges, trying to get in, see how that would play out. But a lot of moving parts moving forward. And that's why, I think people said, well, House settlement's done. We can, brush our hands of it. Now we're good to go. No way. There's a bunch of lawsuits that were sitting on the sideline waiting to see what happened with House. Fontenot versus NCAA is one that's going to be upcoming. It's a little bit bigger deal. It's that NIL rights include media rights, which is a pretty big deal. That's not how the House was set up. And so there's a lot of different parts in place like that that we're going to see roll out in the next couple years that will kind of change everything. So I do think, getting back to our point, that collective bargaining's kind of the right way to go. But there has to be a lot of change to be able to support that setup.
This is fascinating. I'm just sitting back listening to you guys. It's turned in from the noon dish to the next level with Greg Barnes here joining Don Callahan. So I guess, we can wrap the show or we can keep going. But Greg, too, you've done a lot of work on this. What's next? If it's just going to be consistent lawsuits forever, because it seems like that's where we're going. The NCAA has no weight. The courts are going nuts. The lawyers are going nuts. Will it ever, in your opinion, and I know this is a recruiting show, but this affects the young men that are being recruited and the players, is when does it all stop being like this? Or is it just, it's the new era of college athletics, to be honest? Yeah,
and it will eventually slow down with lawsuits, but you have to kind of get there first. And as we've already mentioned, as Don mentioned, there's already been challenges to kind of some of the NIL rules. Bubba has said, he told me back in May that he wasn't even sure how the roster limits got put in the House settlement to begin with. That he doesn't think that'll be in place in 2 or 3 years. And those are the NIL deals, and the roster limits were like half of the House settlement.
Yeah.
So I think they've got to figure out what they want to do. And bottom line, if you look at the college sports world right now, especially on the football side of things, if you were to start a college football conference, a league, you would not do it as it is now, because the NCAA is obsolete.
Yeah.
It worked for a long time when there wasn't really any money in sports. Because if you go back and you look at a lot of the old lawsuits about the NCAA, the reason that the NCAA got away with so much is because it was all focused on education. But once money comes in, then you get into antitrust law.
Mm-hmm.
And it really started in 1984. If you want to go back that far with the TV deal with Oklahoma, the court said that because of the money coming in, NCAA was potentially in violation of antitrust law 41 years ago. And at that point in time, Walter Beyer said, well, we need a professional division. In 1984, the executive director of the NCAA said that. And what happened? They pretty much pushed him out because they didn't want that. And so it's been building, but because there's so much money now, you're really away from the education side of things in terms of the legal arguments. And it's very much all about antitrust now. And so you've got to be able to support your players and let them benefit from the vast revenue that's coming in. And the current setup is just not structured to do that. And they're trying to piecemeal this stuff together to make that work. But that's why I think they really need a commissioner in place to really do a massive shift in what this looks like. And it's going to tick a lot of people off whenever it happens, whether that's the Super League or whatever. But we're headed in that direction. And I think that's how we have to go to make this stuff make sense.
Don Callahan, you see how Greg Barnes is a standard? He comes in.
I knew this was going to be a great show once you told me Greg was coming on, even for half the show. Imagine if he was here the whole time.
Well, I mean,
the internet would break.
The numbers in the room is like everybody say, Greg Barnes is in there. Get in there. Get in here. So it's been a fun discussion. And so circling back to recruiting, Don, what's next for you recruiting coverage so we can wrap this show up and I can let and somebody in the chat said, must be raining in North Carolina. There's no tee times. Greg Barnes will play in the rain. And you know what? Let me do this before we do get out of here. Hold on a second. I'm going to ask a couple questions in the chat, Greg, for you. And this is a question from Lee Grant.
We also need our top 5.
Yeah, we'll do our top 5. And Greg, our top 5 is fries. Top 5 French fries. So be thinking about that as you're answering this question. I think this is a relevant question from Lee Grant, and I think it's good for both of you guys. Do you think there's a possibility that the average fan gets so fed up with the portal, NIL, etc., that they stop going to games and instead go to smaller school games? Greg, I'll let you start there. I think that is they're called fans for a reason. I think people are tired of their pocketbooks being opened repeatedly, but I don't know if they stop going. Greg, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's a generational thing. And I think how people need to think about it, if you go back, when did one and done start in basketball? Like late 90s?
Yeah.
Isn't that right, with Kobe? Or Kevin Garnett, I guess, is one of the first ones.
No, he went.
Garnett went
he
right
went straight.
Yeah.
I can't remember the first one and done. I remember I can't remember.
Correct. Yeah, he was one of the first that went straight. Right. That's what I was going at. But anyway, when that era came in, a lot of people are like, oh, this is horrible for the game, blah, blah, blah. Like, what's going on here? And fast forward, and it's kind of just what it is, and people are accustomed to it. And I think when you start talking about NIL and house and rev sharing and all this kind of stuff, yes, if you've been a diehard fan of college athletics for a long time, you probably don't like it. I mean, it's different. Change is hard. And so I think what you have is a lot of the older crew is kind of turned off by it. And they're maybe, venting and they're taking a step back, which is understandable. On the flip side, Tommy, you got your boys, Don, your kid, my kid. The way they intake sports is completely different than how I've ever done it.
Yeah.
And it's my son's big into fantasy football, so it's not necessarily a fantasy football deal, but it's kind of that mindset of he doesn't sit down and just watch a football game.
Yeah. If
he's home, he'll do it with me, but they watch various games and they follow games online, and there's all kinds of apps where you can follow the stats. It's just a different way to watch football and basketball. And the being able to build teams, I think, is alluring for that generation. And it's not for the older generation. And I think that's really where it kind of comes into play. The one area that I think we can all agree on that it's hurt the product as a fan, maybe not necessarily with TV ratings and that kind of thing. But I really enjoyed when I was younger being able to see a kid come in as a freshman, get out there and have to play because they didn't have anybody at cornerback because the starter got hurt. And he gets trucked like 3 or 4 times or forgets his assignment. But you see potential. And you keep watching him, and each year he gets better and better. And then maybe by the time he's a senior, he's all conference. And so to be able to watch a kid grow and develop to that extent over a 4 or 5 year career, that was something wholesome about college athletics and very, very fun. And you had that connection from year to year. That's gone. We don't have that anymore. And so from my vantage point, that's really what we've lost more than anything. But in terms of TV ratings and the money coming in, we're here for a reason. The money's bigger than it's ever been. There's more eyeballs than there's been in a long time. And it's hard to kind of gauge eyeballs anyway with streaming services and that kind of thing. So I understand it. I just don't think we're going to get to the point where people just pull back so much they're no longer watching the Tar Heels.
Yeah, you mentioned that. I remember Trey Boston and Jabari Price against LSU down there in 2010 getting thrown into fire and turning out to be pretty good players. What you got, Don?
Yeah, I mean, Greg kind of stole my point of the, I think the name recognition, I think does matter and does impact things. I think, if things aren't going well with your team, it will make it a lot harder to watch if they're not winning and you don't know who the hell is on the field. And I think that the name recognition has been proven. I mean, really, any sport. I mean, women's basketball. One of the reasons why that has excelled is because you can now name probably 5 to 10 women's basketball players where you couldn't do that 10 years ago. And so name recognition matters. And I think that's being hurt a lot in college football and could potentially hurt it in the future, especially if they don't get more of control over the roster movement, keep the rosters a little bit more stable from year to year. And the one point I'm going to disagree with Greg on is that just because there's a lot of money pouring in and the viewers are there now doesn't mean that bubble can't pop. And for the reasons that Greg pointed out with how our children, my son does not watch any games. He names certain players here and there, all that sort of stuff. My daughter actually goes to way more sporting events than he does, but she couldn't tell you anyone's names or what. She just likes going for the fun of it. They watch it a lot differently than we do. A lot of it is social media, TikTok, all that sort of stuff. So I don't know what that looks like in the future, because eventually we're going to die and not be watching college football. So what is that next generation? Are they watching college football? We don't know that. And if I think one of the parts of the question was, do they stop watching the bigger schools and go to the smaller schools? I don't think you stop watching and go to the smaller schools. I think if gets to the point where it's just like, this team's not good, I don't know who's on the team, you probably just do something else, But I will say, if you haven't gone to like a Division II game or anything like that, those can be fun, but they're way different than what you'll experience at UNC.
Here I was, thought we were going to end early, and we are about 10 minutes over here on the Noon Dish Next Level hybrid show.
Tommy, I'm not going to dive into this, but I just want to lay it out there since there's a lot of concern about the continuity, which Don makes a great point on that. Another potential lawsuit that's probably coming down the pipe is eligibility in terms of the window. Yeah. Why 5 years? Yeah. It used to be freshmen couldn't play.
Why? Yeah. Why? Who gives the NCAA the ability to make that decision for the players? And right. and the reason why that's important is because you're restricting them from making money.
Correct. And
that's so you say, are we going to have eligibility?
Well, no, I think what the tie is going to be, as Don said, it's about money now. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, you've gotten away from the education side of things legally. Now it's about commercialism. And if you're limiting a kid's ability to make money because of some just random 5-year clause that you put in, that's not going to hold up. And there's a lot of concern that that's going to go away. And it's really going to be a matter of the contract with schools is going to be, because you can go to school for as long as you want.
Mm-hmm.
You've got to be a fully invested student of that university. But you can have 6 majors in theory and play for 10 years.
Well, that's why you need collective bargaining, because I think the players as a whole would be like, hey, look, we shouldn't be playing beyond whatever year it is. Is it, 22, 24, whatever year, whatever the cap you want to put. But if the players are part of that decision, then you can't be sued. But
Correct.
The players aren't right now.
But this is
Here we go.
I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it.
Go ahead. Come on. It's
As
Wednesday. What do you have
We're
better
doing
to
it.
do?
We can do another show.
As of 5 years ago, or 6 years ago now, the NCAA did not have a student set of bylaws, rights, anything in their manual. The students did not have rights.
Yeah.
When Michael McAdoo sued the NCAA back in 2011, get a load of this. UNC was helping him because they thought he was right, that he should be able to get back into school. Now, as it turns out, he wasn't. But in order to sue the NCAA, he had to sue UNC to get to the NCAA, even though UNC was helping him and supported him. Because the NCAA has always had this barrier of we have no ties to student athletes.
Yeah.
The tie is the university. And so now what we're talking about with collective bargaining, as Don said, it would be between the players and the universities and NCAA. That is a massive amount of power to all of a sudden just hand over to the student athletes. Do you think that's going to happen?
And that's really why I think
chance.
There's definitely some points to what we talked about why they don't want to deal with W-2 employees and yada, yada. There's definitely some points to that, but they don't want to lose power, and they will lose a lot of it. And that's exactly why they don't want to collectively bargain. And it makes sense. You're making so much money. And really, if you're in office right now, the NCAA, just fight it, collect all your money. And by the time you lose it and they'll force you to collectively bargain, you'll probably be retired and have plenty of money that you can sleep on at night.
I'm going back to school. I'm going to get a master's, and I'm going to be kicking field goals at 50-some years old out there. And I'm not going to look like Matt Prater because I'm going to be bald and have a long goatee out there doing it. I guess the answer to my question is, when does it end? Never. It doesn't end. And if they...
The end is not in sight. How about that?
Yeah.
The end is not
I
in sight.
think it ends at collectively bargained deals. But yes, that's not in sight.
Insanity. Do we have anything left here on Next Level?
We have lots.
Don Callahan as a guest. I just let the powers that be know that we've turned into a next level here on Wednesday at lunchtime, and the crowd is sticking around, Greg. So keep talking.
Well, I think that we should do this more often, guys. This is fun.
Well, I think it's relevant because, Don, you start following the guys from high school, and Greg and I and people covering the team follow them to their early 20s and now mid 20s these days with 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th year guys. I still can't figure out how those guys are playing. That's
it really, you make a good point there, Tommy, because what we try to do at Inside Carolina is, we do the interviews with Lee Roberts and John Pryor and Bubba Cunningham on one side, and then you've got Sherelle and Don who start on the complete other side of where the student athletes come into play in high school at 10th grade or whatever they may be. That's a wide range, and all of it matters. I mean, all of it affects the other. And I think that's just a fascinating kind of network, kind of a spider web of all these pieces fit together. And if there's failure in any of these select areas, it impacts everything else. And so it's all tied together. And I think Don's done a fantastic job for a long time. So it's good to hear his insight.
Absolutely,
too
Don. I'm
kind.
gonna give you the last. I'm gonna give you the last word since this is your show. You're gonna do the top 5. We're gonna talk about the French fries as we get at.
We
We're
want to
talking
read
about
the
high
top 5.
level
Well, I
stuff.
appreciate the kind words from Greg, and I'm glad that he was able to come on, and hopefully he can come on more frequently.
High level stuff, and we're gonna end it with French fries.
Hey,
It's all about the food. Hell with the money. It's not money. It's food. You feed me, you got me. I will play for your team forever. Don, go with your top 5. You want me to read some off the chat?
yeah, read some of them because I tried to steal. If I want to adjust.
And Greg, be thinking about your top 5 French fries. I was thinking top 5 restaurants like that serve French fries, but other people have gone in with different kind of fries. So, however you want to do it. Preston from Greensboro, chili fries, waffle fries, crinkle fries, Soleil Moon fry, and Glen fry. Preston. Sean Crowley, steak fries, Omaha fries.
That was actually pretty good. At first, I was like, "What type of fry is that?"
Waffle fries, we're all delirious. Curly fries and funnel cake fries. I'm not sure I know what that is. Oren Robbins. This is a new person in our chat. I've never seen the name, so shout out to Oren for joining us. I hope I pronounced it right. Sweet potato fries at Carolina Coffee Shop. Have never had them. That will definitely be on the menu. And there's no other options. Don, you got yours, or does Greg need to go ahead and kick his out? I picture Greg doesn't eat doesn't eat fast food very much.
Yeah. All right, I can go with mine. All right, number 5 for me. I did mostly fast food. I think almost all fast food. Wendy's, number 5. Number 4, I like Red Robin fries, the bottomless. Another plus to that, and they have the seasoning, which is really good on the table. Don't steal it, buy it. McDonald's fries is number 3 for me. Number 2, Bojangles fries, especially if they spread the seasoning equally. You don't want to get in there and only have a couple of them covered and the rest of them not. It ruins the whole experience. But that's definitely my number 2. Number 1 for me, Five Guys. Absolutely delicious.
Oh my God! The problem with Five Guys is they give you 400 pounds of fries.
The problem with Five Guys is when you eat one serving, it knocks, I think, 2 weeks off your life. So you got to do the math before you eat it.
What is the serving? I mean, we went in there and we each got a burger and fries, and we had like enough fries for, a family of 30. Greg, what you got?
So I'm very much a consistency individual.
Oh boy.
So the issue with like Five Guys and Bojangles is you can get it sometimes, and they're firm and crisp and have a little bit of a crunch, which I think is required. But 50% of the time when you go, they're soggy and they have too much seasoning. Like if I get a bag of fries and they're soggy, like if you can't hold a French fry up and just stand up, I don't want it. And I'll just throw the bag out. I'm not wasting my time eating
I eat those fries.
Yeah. And so Wendy's, whenever they changed their fry setup a couple years ago, I think they're sneaky good fries.
Yes.
I don't eat a lot of fast food fries. I like Zaxby's fries. They have crinkle fries.
Oh, that's a good one. I forgot.
They're pretty good. I like Char Grill. I think their fries are pretty good. They're probably a little heavy on the salt. And then I'm surprised we didn't get a truffle fries out of Don, Tommy. I don't even know how many I gave you, but
I'm going Chick-fil-A waffle fries, and that's the be-all, end-all. I mean, I like Bojangles. I can't eat Bojangles chicken anymore. Stomach does not agree with it, but those fries are good. To Greg's point,
we had to cancel an episode because of Bojangles chicken sandwich.
We didn't have to cancel it. We delayed it. And I don't even know if that's accurate. I can't remember, but I've had problems with Chick-fil-A over with Bojangles.
There was a sandwich shop in Morrisville up near RTP. They're no longer open. I can't even remember the name of them now. But there was a deli, but they served sweet potato fries, and they were waffle fries, and they cooked them almost a little too long, so they were kind of crunchy. But they served it with it had to be like 3 tablespoons of cinnamon honey butter.
Uh-oh.
And it was like a dessert for lunch, and it was fantastic. But I mean, you ate the bag of fries and the container of butter, and it's kind of the same thing. pack on 3,000 calories just in one sitting, but really good.
This is not a health show. Okay.
Here lies a waffle fry, a honey butter waffle fry. But yeah, I don't know what Jim Holland's talking about. I mean, he had a good take, and now he's saying Chick-fil-A waffle fries are soggy and nasty. I have never had a soggy Chick-fil-A waffle fry. But they're, to Don's point, we had Al's Burger Shack the other day ahead of the Carolina TCU game on Sunday, and their fries are solid. I mean, you just got a bunch of options, but I'm not going to give any credit to McDonald's fries. I'm not going to do it. Anything left, Don Callahan? I don't even want to start thinking about fries because I've already been eating too much junk as it is.
I think I'm good. I appreciate Greg coming on.
Shout out to Greg Barnes for joining here on the Noon Dish. Yeah, Greg comes in, steals the show. We go 20 minutes over, and we get it all knocked out. Ton of content here. If you missed us totally live, go back and watch it again on YouTube or on the podcast feeds. Stay tuned for we've got a baseball show dropping tomorrow. We've got a game plan with Jason Staples and me. No Greg Barnes on that. And then Inside Carolina Live is Saturday. I've got a former player. I've got Jason Staples in the lot full time. I've got both Inside Carolina interns and maybe a great photographer and maybe a great jefe, a boss, a former president will join us in the Bowls lot, 12:30 to 2:30. Shout out to Johnny T-shirt as well. Thanks, boys.